Hello, folks, and welcome back to Chris Wide Africa here, the Rugby Ascendant segment on a Friday, the 11th of June already. Can you imagine that? It's already 11th of June. Where is this year gone? I feel like I've been robbed. Well, today my special feature guest is none other than Jonathan Kaplan, one of the most famous referees and officials in the rugby world, a South African who's now working with Major League Rugby here in North America, and very excited to have him on the channel. This was a suggestion by one of the viewers, said, hey, why don't you get Jonathan Kaplan? I'm like, well, sure. Do you have a contact for him? I don't. It's not like we hang out at a coffee bar or something like that, so if you can help me get in touch with him, I'd be happy to have him on as a guest. And this will be my first official from rugby that's been on here. And the other thing is, I usually, for Jonathan's sake, let him know I wear rugby jerseys on all of my streams, but I don't. That's even the news streams I do. I wear rugby jerseys, but I don't have quite the impressive collection that you have there with signed jerseys from all my experiences. So this is the 2015 officials jersey. It's a referee's jersey from the World Cup. So with that, Jonathan Kaplan, welcome to the program. We've got you on mute. I think I asked you to go on mute. That's on me.
Thanks very much, Chris. Good to be on the show. Look forward to chatting.
It's a pleasure. Looking forward to it. So like I said, a lot of people, when I mentioned in some of the social media outlets I have that I was going to do this, a number of people said they aren't able to make the live stream, but they're definitely looking forward to watching this after the fact. So it's a pleasure to have you with us. Now, when people look up your bio, it says that you were born in Durban, but it doesn't say if you're actually raised there. Were you actually raised in Durban?
Yeah, partly. Definitely born there, but when I was about 14, I left Durban to go stay in Johannesburg. And the last part of my schooling, the last 4 years, was completed in Joubert. But I'm probably born and bred in a roundabout way. Although they didn't call me the Wandering Jew for nothing, because I ended up living in Joburg, Pretoria, Cape Town, Durban. You know, even represented Boland, which is Wellington area in the Western Cape, as a referee.
Well, when you say that they call you the Wandering Jew, do they actually call you that, or you're just being
No, I'm just
self-deprecating?
No, I'm just joking. I think the Wandering Jew is actually a plant. It's like a creeper or something like that.
I think it is.
But I always think of myself like I was never actually settled. I kept moving all the time, still moving.
Well, that's an interesting thing. You've mentioned that. So if you don't mind me asking, you are Jewish. I was asked the other day about the influence of the Jewish community in South Africa, and if there are Jews in South Africa. And I told my audience this. In fact, the Jewish community has been long established in South Africa and been very influential throughout its time. And there are, I don't know the exact count of those of the Jewish faith who live in South Africa today, but there are many famous Jewish South Africans, including Helen Zille.
Yeah. I mean, there's only 14.7 million of us in the world today, so probably make a bigger noise than what our numbers reflect. But the South African community is it's a pretty strong community. It's a conservative community, and you know, it's probably around about 3 generations old for the most part. So they've done well. You know, came from all parts of the world, particularly after the Second World War and the Holocaust, and, you know, created a niche for themselves. And the community, you know, I think it's been halved over the last 30 years with people moving all over the world, but it's still a strong community. It's still vibrant, and, you know, they've got lots to be proud of, like you correctly say.
Well, I've interacted with many Jewish communities around the world. Of course, I've lived all over Africa and all over Europe. And one of the Jewish communities that was most interesting to me was the folks that live in Tunisia. That's a very ancient Jewish community. It was greatly diminished because after the creation of Israel, the modern state of Israel, a lot of Tunisian Jews moved to Israel. But there's still a number of Jews who live in Tunisia, and they are influential and very fascinating group of people there. It's an interesting community, but it's not a big one anymore. It's a very small community these days.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with where most of my people live these days. I mean, I know there's a sizable component in the USA, and there's reasonable in Canada, but yeah, it's just, I mean, I often thought of it like, you know, I'm South African, I'm Jewish, but I actually represent a bigger demographic than just what my nationality is. So, you know, rugby lovers, yes, I'm representing them. the refereeing group, I'm representing them. At the moment, whilst I'm on your show, I'm not really representing MLR, but in a roundabout way I am, because I'm the director of match officials, so in a way I am representing them. So I like the idea of representing my people, but I also don't confine it to just something which is a social convention. And I like the idea of broadening horizons and mixing and challenging. And so I think that's part of my modus operandi, actually.
Well, I like that approach, I have to say, Jonathan, because in this day and age when people are always trying to bifurcate people or put people into little boxes and identify them by this, that, and the other, I think one of the healthiest things is that when we realize that we're part of multiple communities, many communities, you just mentioned several right there, the rugby world, the officiating world, being a person of Jewish faith, being a South African. It's the way I always look at things. I was an Army officer, I'm of this heritage, from America, yada, yada, yada. So we're all find ourselves in multiple categories, and it's kind of like those nesting dolls, those Russian nesting dolls. Here you're one thing, you take the next layer, one thing. So you're part of many different communities. Well, you got to start in rugby very young. As I understand, you went out there with a whistle at the age of 17. Is that correct?
Yeah. Look, I think rugby in South Africa I suppose people are quite passionate about it, and I mean, it's not a religion, but it's quite close. So
yeah, it's not far from a religion.
yeah. So I mean, I think I grew up with a diet of watching rugby and being involved in rugby, and I was never very good. I was a very small boy growing up, and then I wasn't physically. I think I wasn't physically compatible with the game. I didn't really want to train and lift weights. I don't like the idea of 3 sets of 10. So I sort of found my niche whilst trying to be involved and trying to be a student of the game. I found my niche as a touch judge for the first team. So I used to travel around and then volunteer to run up and down. Not many people wanted to do that job, but I found it pretty interesting to stay close to the game. And then when I was 17, or just before that, I got my nose broken whilst playing for the third team. We didn't really have a third team. It was just ragtag, everybody who was left over filling in. I got smashed and my nose broke. Like I always say, it's a pretty juicy target being Jewish. So, I mean, couldn't really miss. So, anyway, I went, I broke my nose. So my mom suggested that I become a ref. It suited her narrative as well, and she made all the inquiries. But after my first game, I realized that I'd landed, and this was my space in terms of where I wanted to be in the game.
Well, you definitely found your place. I guess we have your mom to thank for all that followed after that. She pushed you in the right direction. I suppose after getting your nose broke, she's a lot happier on the side of the field, or you're away from the action on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what type of involvement I would have had. I may have found my way here in any case, but that was the catalyst was the phone call. I didn't have a driver's license at the time, so she had to take me to meetings. I was 10 years younger than the next youngest guy, and he was about 7 years younger than the next youngest guy. So I really was a bit out of place there. But like I said, once I got my first game, and it wasn't much of a game, but once I got it and I went out there, I actually felt that this was my space.
Well, the thing about the game is that a lot of people don't realize is, you watch basketball and officials get some exercise, but it's a short court. They're not running all the time, and there's enough officials on the court. The National Football League, you don't really have officials running up and down the field on those 60-yard passes because you've got side judges down at the end to cover that, and you've got television. But rugby is definitely a game where you got to be fit as an official. You don't see, any I don't know, Sandef generals out there running around on the rugby pitch. If you know what I'm talking about, those guys tend to be quite large, the generals there. But for rugby officials, you have to be very fit. You're in the action, you're right there, and you got to be very careful too, because the game can come right around you. You could wind up in a tackle. Saw that in Atlanta last week. One of our officials there got tackled at the end on a try. But so, I mean, what's it like? I mean, you can't just like rock up and, hey, here's a whistle, go out there, do it. You've actually got to train to be fit, don't you?
Yeah, so when I was in my teens, I wasn't physically aware of what I could do with my body and how I could train and how I should train. Once I got a sense of purpose that I wanted to be a ref, I mean, this may come across arrogantly, and sometimes I don't say it, but I don't mind because this is who I am. I sort of knew that I was the best, in inverted commas, but I had to get myself into the shape first to be that person, and then get experience and scars along the way, which I did. And so I'm into my 38th year as a referee. And I probably lost between 6 and 8 Ks on a diet of road running in particular. So I'd train 3 days a week, and I'd run a race on the weekend, like let's say a half marathon or a marathon, and I'd cut myself down to what I considered to be a good shape to be able to compete with whoever else was out there. And then to maintain that. And I mean, it wasn't really a challenge because I enjoyed it, but enjoyed the running. But at some stage I had to choose one or the other, because I was doing marathons and ultras, and it wasn't really compatible with the rugby that I was doing. Once I started achieving success and climbing my way up the top tiers of the ladder, it became important to focus. So I gave it up for 20 years, and I've just started to do a little bit again now. But I think your point around being fit, I don't think people realize, but we are tested every season as professional referees, sometimes 2-3 times a season. And the tests involve speed endurance, agility. They measure, I suppose, body fat. They measure your shape and if you're carrying condition, and it changes. It's science 20 years ago is not science now. It's ever changing. So, I did what I could. I had a bad injury in '98. I had to have an operation, and on my knee, I had actually a terminal injury. But I managed myself, so I stopped doing all the things I enjoyed. Like, I couldn't do any lateral movement. I couldn't run on the road anymore. Couldn't play touch rugby. So I had to just maintain my space, my shape. But I managed it till 2013, which is when I retired as a professional ref, and I've carried on now, and it's been good.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that you mentioned marathon there and half marathons. Now you're not one of those crazy people. You're from Durban that runs the Comrades, are you? I mean, that's brutal, that ultra marathon.
Yeah, I am actually.
Have you run you've run the Comrades?
Yeah, I've done Comrades 10 times, so I've got my green number. I've done Oceans. I've done 2 Oceans 11 times, which is a 56K run. Probably one of the most beautiful ultras in the world. That's in Cape Town. Mm-hmm. Comrades is 90 Ks, as you well know.
Yep.
That's pretty much an institution in South African sport. You get 20,000 people at a time going either up or down, and I've done 132 marathons. So yeah, wow. So I started off. I'm getting old, and I'm a bit cranky at the moment. But I started off doing the 50 states, and then COVID hit. So I've gone backwards physically, and I'm not sure I can get back there, but I can try. So I did 7 out of 50, and hopefully, be able to plot a few more.
Well, so you are, in fact, one of those crazy people that runs the Comrades. Look, I have nothing but respect for people that. One of my favorite South African movies is The Long Run with Herman Muller-Stahl, and that's about the Comrades and also about the social conditions in South Africa. And he plays a coach for ultra-marathoners in a cement factory, and he loses his job as part of the new dispensation. And so he winds up coaching a Namibian girl who's an illegal immigrant, and it has all the zeitgeist that's going on in South Africa. This is from about 10 or 15 years ago, but it's about have you seen it?
No, but I did want to just say that Armin Muller-Stahl was one of my favorites. I didn't see him in many movies, but I think he was in Music Box. Mm-hmm. And I just remember what a powerful actor he was. Maybe the role suited him in that movie, but he was just a force. He was an incredible actor.
No, he's an absolutely amazing actor. The unfortunate part is that, of course, he was from the DDR, the German Democratic Republic, so he was in the East for much of his acting career. Had he been in the Hollywood scene his entire career, he would be a household name because he was just really that good. He had such a presence in so many ways. But I'm glad to see I found another fan of Armin Muller-Stahl. But it's a great movie. So you've done the Comrades. I'm really impressed. For years I wanted to run the Comrades. I thought I'd do it, and naively before I really thought about it, I said I want to run from Pietermaritzburg down to Durban. And then I was talking to somebody that done it, and they said, no, mate, hang on a second, hang on, listen, but you think about this. And I thought about it, I said, wait a second, you know what? You're running downhill most of the way. I'll bet that's brutal on your tendons and joints. And Exactly right. You want to run from
Yeah.
Durban to Pietermaritzburg. Even though it's uphill, it's a lot less brutal. Do you find that to be the case if you run it both directions?
Yeah, I did 5 up and 5 down. So basically what happened, I did the Comrades in 88, 89, and then 93, 94, and 96. And in those years, 93, 94, 96, I was actually, I got onto the SARU panels, and then I worked my way up. And I ran Comrades on the Monday because it was always on the 31st of May. And I got a call on Tuesday morning to say that some referees had underperformed, and I was nominated to do this big game between Free State and the Bulls in Bloemfontein. And so I didn't tell them that I just ran Comrades. I was like so excited. I was basically jumping up and down. But after 90 kilometers, you're not fresh.
No.
And your joints and your muscles, they're really painful. So I went to I found my physio straight away, a bloke called James Fleming. And I said to him, I need a concoction of your strongest drugs. I've got a game on Saturday and I can't walk now. So between the drugs, the physio, and a little bit of luck, because I think a lot of the lactic acid got out of my body after 4 or 5 days, which was just in time for the game. And nobody actually noticed that I was, I wouldn't call myself struggling, but I was
labored.
No, I wasn't actually labored. I was just, I think as I started running, I felt a bit better. But initially in the first 5 minutes, all my muscles were still, I hadn't done anything for 5 days, because 90 kilometers will do that to you. Just on your point of up or down, and then sorry, just to finish, I did from 2000 when I retired in 13 as a pro ref. Then I thought, well, I may as well try and complete my last 5 to get my green number. The green number is a worthless piece of cloth, but it's significant of all those miles in America or kilometers in South Africa that you put in the training. And then no matter who you are, 90 kilometers is still 90 kilometers. And on the uprun, the first marathon is all uphill. So just think about it. The first marathon is all uphill. You get to the midpoint and you've got a 3-kilometer hill, and then it's ups and downs, but you've just run 50 kilometers of uphill. So yes, the uphill is less brutal on your muscles, but whether you're running up or down, it's still, they're different challenges.
No, and I'd say that after 90 kilometers, knackered doesn't describe how you feel. I mean, it's got to be rough on the body, that 90 kilometers, but something else.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we've got some lovely comments here from the audience. Let me just bring a couple of those things in real quick there, Jonathan. And then they've got some questions. Some of my audience are stealing my thunder for questions I prepared, but let me see. So Paulie, who's a firefighter in South Africa, says, watching a game ref by Jonathan is always free-flowing and easy, makes viewing, and I'm sure playing pleasurable. Yeah, no, I'd have to agree with that. My experience watching games he's called, you're not worried about trouble breaking out or things getting out of hand. They always seem to have it under control. Teresa Bauman says, Jonathan, you're the best. She's really looked forward to this interview, so it's awesome to see you do the interview. She's happy to see you here. And let's see, there's a couple other here. I'm just trying to find one really quickly that was good. So there was a question that excuse me, that one of my guests asked here, or one of my audience asked, and it says, do you have some game? This is from Leuven Janssen van Rensburg. Says, does Jonathan have some games he's ref that stand out more than others? I'm sure he does, and not the least of which is the Gorillas in the Mist game. Maybe we will talk about that. But are there any games that stand out in your mind more than others that really you are very memorable for you?
Yeah. Can I just answer quickly the second point?
Sure. The Gorillas in the Mist.
No. The lady who said that I was the best.
Oh, okay.
It is a striving. It is a striving to be the best. There's no question about it. When you're at a certain level and you do think you can compete with some of the other bests in the world, you want to be the best. And so that was a constant striving of mine. Even when I was at the top of the tree, I still wanted to be better. And there's 2 different skills. One of them is climbing to get to the top, and so that involves a different attitude, a different skill set to you're at the top and everyone's trying to pull you down. And so, just from my own perspective, it was important to me. But the point really that I want to make is that, and I learned this from Sean Penn, who the actor who went up to get an Academy Award, and he said, in the world of actors, we know there's no such thing as the best. And I think that's applicable for every arena where, what is the best? It's always in the eyes of the beholder. So when someone says I'm the best, I'm grateful, because I think what they're saying is, you're my favorite. And that's important. You're my favorite is much more important to me than you're the best, because I know there's no such thing as the best. And it's very difficult to compare across generations. There were some very good refs in the 70s and 80s when I was sort of getting used to rugby and getting involved. And, I had my favorites, but, they were often different from others. Just remind me what the second
was about games that stand out in your mind, and I mentioned the Gorillas and the Mitts game for that final, but I don't know if that's one that stands out in your mind.
Yeah, no, I mean, we can talk about it. It's probably not one of my favorites, but it's completely unique. So I think my favorite game was Australia-New Zealand in 2000. What was it? 5th of August 2000, I think. The 3 weeks before, that played a free-flowing game where New Zealand jumped out to a 24-0 lead after 7 minutes, and Australia came back to lead, and Lomu went round Larkin to score the winning try, and 5 tries each. And that game is commonly known as the game played in heaven. And it was probably a bit looser. The teams hadn't got together. The second game was a bit tight, and someone said to me, "Did you feel a bit nervous? That was only my 7th test match, and I was quite green on that arena. I'd just recently done the first Six Nations game ever, and so, but Italy versus Scotland is a far cry from Australia, New Zealand. And in those days, Australia was actually very competitive. I think they won probably about 45 to 50% of the games against New Zealand. So I said to them, before that game 3 weeks ago, nobody knew about that game, and so the same thing can apply to my game. Why can't this game be the best? So that was my mindset around the task that I had. Obviously, I was humble enough to recognize that this was the biggest game of my career in terms of the pace of the game, in terms of the quality of the players, in terms of the rivalry, and in terms of what was at stake. Because in that game, what was at stake was number 1 team in the world, the Bledisloe Cup, and number 1 ranking, I think, in world rugby. So, I went out there, I did what I could, and John Eales got a last-minute penalty. I had to penalise New Zealand in New Zealand, which some people find quite challenging. Some supporters or fans find challenging. I didn't think about it. I just
did it.
I just did it. But obviously, you had to check that it was the right call, which I'm grateful it was. But it did define my space. It defined my career, because it was the biggest game, because of what was at stake. Australia winning the Bledisloe Cup, the Tri-Nations, and number 1 spot in the world with one decision that I made 3 or 4 minutes into injury time. It was a brave call, but I think more than that, I was quite proud of the fact that I let the game rock and roll the whole way through, and I was true to my philosophy in the game, which was that one of the key components. So it's flair, judgment, and nerve. Judgment is the ability to see right from wrong. Mm-hmm. Flair is the ability to add color to a picture. So management cues, game understanding, getting the best out of people on the field. And then nerve is the ability to hold on under pressure. So that's, I was pretty chuffed that I got to that point and was able to do it, and sort of showed me as well that I could, I didn't always push all the right buttons, but I did in that instance. So that was a big game for me, and defined my career and my space. And I always loved doing Bledisloe Cup. Bledisloe Cup for me was the quickest rugby. It was the most challenging for me physically, mentally. Even though I'd done a bit of preparation, it was always a challenge. The game that you're referring to is a Super Rugby final that was played. I mean, an hour before that game, I think it was played between the Hurricanes and Crusaders in Christchurch. An hour before the game, there wasn't an issue. There was nothing, and then all of a sudden, this dense fog. All of a sudden, this dense fog rolled in, and you couldn't really see 40 meters above the ground. 30, 40 meters above the ground. So I had to make a decision. So the broadcasters were obviously not happy because you couldn't really see well, and all the cameras that were mounted very high up were useless. The public who had paid to get in the ground couldn't see from certain parts of the stadium, but the two teams were keen to play. So my only real concern was
safety.
The safety, safety, player safety. And once I ascertained that the only real risk was the ball disappearing into the clouds and then coming back out of the clouds, I didn't think that was enough to stop a game. So we played it. Crusaders won 19-12. One try, Casey Lalala, I think, scored the winning try.
Well, that was a question I wanted to ask you, Jonathan. Okay, it's safe now. It's been a while. That was back in 2006. There was just a single try in that game. Was it really a try? No.
Did I really see it? Did anyone else see it?
Did anyone see it? We didn't see it on TV. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding.
Even people ask me what happened in that game. I say I haven't got the foggiest.
Good answer. That's a good answer. I like that. But yeah, that one's been nicknamed Gorillas in the Mist after the fact. Yeah, Crusaders, Wellington Hurricanes. Yeah, that was definitely something. So those, the first one's the one that really stands out for you. There's some more. Listen, we've got load shedding in South Africa. A lot of my audience is in South Africa, so some people are just coming into the stream right now. So folks, welcome to the Rugby Ascendant segment of Chris Wide Africa. My special feature guest today is Jonathan Kaplan, world-renowned official and referee from rugby. I've even gotten around to some of the highlights of his career. We've been talking about that. Some very nice comments coming in from the viewing audience. But Jonathan is the first official ever to get 50 test matches, and then he set the record at 70. And then Nigel Owens had the audacity to come along and break that record and set it at 100 now before he retired. But for a long time, for many people, Jonathan Kaplan was the gold standard. And there's a very nice comment here by Renier Dutoy saying, what a humble gentleman, which is interesting, Jonathan, because you made that comment. You said you don't want to sound arrogant, but you knew you were at the top of your game. And I agree with Renier. The way that you present yourself, it doesn't come across as arrogant. It comes across as you knew who you were and you knew what you were trying to do, and you recognize that. And I think that's an important thing to say. It's very kind of him to say that. Now, Drian asked me, and he's currently living in Botswana. He's from Port Elizabeth. He says, ask Jonathan. Now, this, you don't have to answer this one, Jonathan, okay? You don't have to answer. If we can move right past it. But because if I ask this question to Craig Joubert, I probably will never get a call back. But he says, ask Jonathan if he ever made a call that afterwards he thought he made the wrong call. I'm sure that happens to all officials. I mean,
yeah. No, I'm happy. I'm happy to talk about it. So and I actually think it's helpful for referees to take ownership of errors, even if it happens in an important game. You know, Craig's a good friend of mine. He'd probably acknowledge that he made some mistakes in big games, in finals, in playoff games. I mean, some of them, unfortunately, I mean, one in particular, I think he was thrown under the bus a bit, where, you know, was there a need to clarify to everybody that he had made a mistake? Because if you're going to do that, then you may as well do it for everybody. Otherwise, it's a bit unfair. Yeah. So in my case, and I'm happy to do it. You know, I've got an Instagram account. So if people are watching now, I've got an Instagram account called J Kaplan Ref, and I just started it a few months ago. But I try and post things, and mostly it's looking back over my shoulder. You know, at the moment I haven't been able to travel in my capacity now as MLR match official director, and obviously I'll start posting more current stuff, you know, when that opportunity arises. But it's an account where I try and tell stories around my experiences. And I think my biggest, and I'll post that soon, my biggest error was in a Six Nations game between Ireland and Wales. Quite a close game, close, hard-fought game. Ball was kicked out. The AR stuck his flag up. The ball, I made a mark and then was moving infield to take up my position, and the ball was thrown in quickly. I looked back at him, he dropped his flag, and play went upfield and Wales scored. The Irish players rushed into, you know, I knew something was wrong, but in those days we couldn't go back more than 5 meters from the try line. So I went to my AR, I said, look, I'm going to ask you a question. I moved the Irish players away and I said to him, was the correct ball taken for the line out? And he said, yes, it was, in which case I'd have to award the try, even if I had an inkling that something was wrong, because the TMO couldn't help me. Craig was standing on the other side. He hadn't seen what had happened either. So I awarded the try. as it turned out, it wasn't a try, and I was complicit in a poor decision. The ball had gone into the kick direct into touch had gone into the stands. So, I should have realized as well. But I think that, and that's a mistake, and I need to own that. If the score was 49-10, nobody'd be talking about it. But because the game was close, 19-13, so Warren Gatland after the game said, it's an error. We all know it's an error, but we think we would have won in any case, which he may, it's just his opinion. And then the coach of the Irish was Declan Kidney, and obviously he was disappointed with the decision. He didn't throw his toys. He didn't spit the dummy. He's a really nice gent. And I phoned him a couple of days later, and I just said to him, and I was like, and this is the part really to come out of it. It was a crackling conversation. I was quite emotional. I don't like letting people down. I was one of the top officials in World Rugby at that stage, and I made a bum call, or complicit in a bum call, and contacted Declan, and we had a conversation for about half an hour. And he's pretty emotional because he was under pressure in his job. He was a very good coach, but more than that, I think he was a very likable man, and I enjoyed him as a person. I didn't know what he could really do as a coach, but as a person, he's a great guy. And we had this conversation, and I said, I was telling him from my point of view that I need to take responsibility for my team. And I remember Steve Walsh telling me that when you're around for as long as you are, sooner or later you're gonna make a mistake, and it's going to come back at you. And all the top referees, Nigel,
Craig Joubert,
Craig, Alain Roland,
Jaco Piper,
everyone's made mistakes in games which are blowout scores and nobody cares, and then they make mistakes in a game where there's a close score and people scrutinize it. And I'm not making excuses for it. It was an error. It'll always be an error. But when I spoke to Campo about it as well, David Campese, they said, do you think they're going to remember me for the intercept pass that I threw against the Lions, or they remembered me for the 64 tries that I scored? Or 68, what is it? I can't remember now. Anyway, one of the two. The answer is in the eyes of the beholder. Because if you think the glass is half full and you appreciated Campo for his genius, you'll say what a brilliant player he was, and look at what he did. And if you want to be critical of the fact that he missed a couple of tackles, or he was a bit opportunist and did something he shouldn't have done on defense, that's the way you want to live it like that. That's okay.
No, that's a great point. And it brings me to something I want to bring up here very quickly. And they got a lot of comments coming in now from people, because I said the audience has grown a little bit with load shedding ending, people getting back online. But rugby's more than just what happens on the pitch. I mean, that's what we go for. That's what we're into, whether we play or we watch it as spectators and fans. But rugby's also interesting from a standpoint that people, I couldn't tell you the name of any NBA referee. And when I watched National Football League, I could tell you the name of a few because they were always at the big games, but didn't really know them. I don't know any of the names of any officials in the National Hockey League, and I'm a rabid hockey fan. But I can tell you, I've got favorite officials that I truly enjoy watching, and when I know they're calling a game, I want to see that game. Steve Walsh was one of them. I always thought Steve was awesome. And then, of course, yourself, you're up there on that list. And then Jaco Piper, Craig Joubert, and so many other folks out there. You know who they are. The fans, the spectators identify with the officials. What I want to ask you, which I'm leading to, is so that, and then there's also the same thing with some of the commentators. You really identify with commentators, but do you as officials on the pitch realize or recognize that you're a part of the game from the fans' perspective, and a lot of them actually really like the officials and look forward to seeing the officials on the field? Is that something you're aware of or no?
Yeah, I think it's nice to be liked. Better to be liked than disliked. But at the end of the day, we've got a job to do. So I think in some games where I made big calls, and it was in favor of the away team, maybe 60, 80%, 90% of the home crowd would boo, and then try and remember that if their team lost the game. So the popularity thing is not. It's not it's important. It's nice to look back and people still come to you and they say, you were my favorite. And that's a legacy of your work. But for other people, they want to remember the things they want to remember. It's, like I said, you can't control that. So
No,
you just live with it.
that's fair. But
Yeah.
I guess my question is more along: are you aware of that? I mean, for instance, I walked up to Craig Joubert at San Francisco at the Sevens World Cup, and said, "Hey," because I knew who Craig Joubert was. He doesn't know me from Adam, but I mean, as in many sports, you're an official. You wouldn't expect that people would know who you are. I wouldn't recognize you, but of course, I know exactly who Craig Joubert was. I'm like, "Hey, Craig Joubert."
Yeah.
Is it something the officials are aware of that people know who they are?
Yeah. And I think one of the cool things about rugby is the engagement is for the most part is really good. So I made that decision against New Zealand in New Zealand. I went out that night till 4:30 in the morning. There was only one idiot who subsequently apologized to me. He actually found me. He waited for me to exit the hotel, and he came to me and he said, "I was the idiot that was abusing you," and I'm sorry, but no, it's okay. I mean, you are aware of it, but is it important in the bigger scheme of things? I'm not sure how important it is.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, Paulie said that Tapahenig was second to Jonathan, then Craig Joubert third. So he has you first, and then Tapahenig, and then Craig Joubert third in his book as officials. So interesting.
Thank you, Polly.
It's very kind. Nice compliment there. Lazan says that she's also from Port Elizabeth and living in Botswana right now. She said that I believe in my time he was the best ref because he was fair, controlled, and accurate. I would second that sentiment, Lazan. It's very kind of you to say that. Several people are saying let the game flow, let it continue. That's good stuff there. And then what's this? Hank says, oh yeah, this is a very good question I wanted to ask you, Jonathan, and that's just what I was going to ask. But Hank Klopper, who's the one who encouraged me to contact you, Hank said, what's Jonathan's view of the red card send-off? Should a game be handicapped with 14 versus 15 for the rest of the game? It's an interesting question.
Yeah, so we're trialing the 20-minute red card in MLR, and I'm not sure. I think we've only had one. Oh, we've had 1, 2, 3. We've had 3, I think. I'm not sure. I know. I understand both sides of the argument. The one side is should a team be punished because one of their players transgresses so egregiously, and the other side is we've got an obligation to the public. So, I mean, imagine in ice hockey if they never had, I don't know how long players sit out. Is it 2 minutes? When there's a power play or something like that. So, imagine if you didn't have that, it would change the shape of the game, because I think then players would get away with stuff that they would carry on doing. And in rugby, it's the same. So, is 20 minutes enough? It probably depends on the offense. Sometimes a red card is as a result of repeated infringement. So the player who gets sent off is a bit unlucky because he's just the last person who offends. Other times, player stamps on another player's head. That's not unlucky. That's worthy of a lot more than 20 minutes, I think.
That's worthy of a sanction. Yep.
No, well, besides that, I think that's just like elimination. So then you say, we have an obligation to the crowd, but I think that's a bit narrow in sort of outlook, because what about the players who transgress? Don't they also have an obligation to the public? Why is it the referee's responsibility? All we're doing is seeing what's happened and then taking action based on how we've been told to react. Whereas the player is the person who actually delivers the punch. So as an example, and I found this, I mean, I'm not surprised, but I found it like really odd behavior, is the French bloke who elbowed the Welsh player. I don't know if it was Wainwright. I'm in the World Cup. Jaco Paper sends him off correctly, and he's completely vilified for sending him off. He then poses very naively, but there's nothing malicious in what he's doing. He poses with a couple of supporters, and his World Cup is done.
Yeah, that was so wrong. It was unfortunate.
Yeah, but my point really is, was there any commentary in any of the reporters to say, hang on a second, and the only one that did actually was a guy called James Haskell, who said, hang on a second, everyone's having a crack at paper. Why is nobody having a crack at the guy who did it?
Well, that's my point. That's what's so wrong about it. Yeah, that was my issue, and I don't take issue with Jaco Piper. I think it's unfortunate, but yeah, it just it's a very unfortunate situation. It was a shame. But with the 20 minutes for red card, that's an interesting proposal. Honestly, from my perspective, as someone that follows the game, I don't have an issue if a team loses a player because of red card. It can be brutal, but the players know the rules, and emotions may get in the way. But you've got to play. And one thing I love about rugby is because people that don't know rugby go, well, what a rough sport, what a rough sport. But we have comparatively fewer serious injuries than, say, National Football League, because we don't have people wearing pads and helmets launching themselves at each other. You tackle in a proper way that's designed not to cause injuries. The rugby, IRB, or World Rugby now, unlike the National Football League, took concussions seriously many years ago and had this concussion protocol. But I will say this, when it comes to red cards, Jonathan, Bismarck Duplessis' red card by Romain Poix was unjust. And I'm still angry about that. but that was over. They struck that from his record later on. So not to pick on the French referees, but not a big fan of Jerome Garces and Romain Poix. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But so you've done an awful lot of things. First, I think you had the first ever Six Nations game. You were the first person to ever call Six Nations game. Is that correct?
Yeah. It was an interesting game because I think it ended up 3 tries each, but the winning of the game was in Diego Dominguez. He was one of the best kickers that I think I'd ever come across, and playing for a weaker team who had just come into the competition. Scotland people don't remember, but they were the champions in '99. So it was the newcomers against the champions. And I think Italy rode the wave of optimism and enthusiasm and got themselves in a position to win the game. And Dominguez, I think the difference in the end was Dominguez's drop kicks. Could be mistaken, but I seem to remember that. And then I think sometimes this is what people don't realize out there, is that I do my job on the field, but then beauty's in the eyes of the beholder. And I had an assessor at the time called Brian Lee from England, and he was a very gentle man, like very astute and reserved. But he wrote me a glowing report about my game. So I think that set me up for the next game, which was that Bledisloe Cup game that I spoke to you about. Mm-hmm. And then 3 months later, I did one of the great experiences of my refereeing career in Marseille, in the Velodrome between France and the All Blacks, which was a stunning, one of my best experiences on a test match field anywhere in the world.
Now, Ants, who's also South African. By the way, I don't think there's no way you can ever deny you're South African. It did slip out earlier. You were chuffed about something, so very much a South African expression there. But Ants, who's also South African, said, "Please ask Jonathan, who was the toughest player to ref? Who was the challenge out there for you? Was there anybody that stood out that was either difficult or either make the calls on them or just to keep an eye on them in the field, or they were just challenging the official?"
Yeah, I think as you master your craft, it becomes less of a challenge. So for me, the challenging players were those when I was starting out, and the 2 names that always spring to mind are the 2 players that the nicest blokes off the field. I mean, I'm friends with them on social media, and I'd have a drink with them out of preference. But Helgaard Miller from the Free State, he was a captain, got quite emotional at times. Not so much with me, but I did find him quite emotional, quite difficult to talk to. So in terms of leadership, it was, when you're trying to get a message across and the person you're speaking to is seeing the red mist, you sort of wonder whether it's worthwhile. And the other one was Kobus Visser, who is the kindest, gentlest guy off the field. But he was quite a beast on the field and quite difficult. When I used to see Kobus Visser thundering in when a player had fallen on the wrong side, I learned that I needed to blow the whistle quicker, otherwise he'd end up stomping on the player. So at 140 kilograms before lunch, it would be pretty uncomfortable for the player he stood on. So I'd rather give the penalty for his team than, you go like, what about the advantage? I go like, yeah, okay.
I like how you described him, 140 kilos before lunch.
Yeah.
That's a good description. Willem Wiekersby says that Craig, I presume he's talking about Craig Joubert. Craig's late dad, Des, was his PT teacher at DHS, high school there, I guess. Des also coached the first 15s in the 70s. And he said, it's nice chat, Colonel and Jonathan. He's enjoying the conversation. So, yeah. Let's see. Maybe they should have, this is a comment from Liaison, maybe they should have a yellow, red, and black card system where yellow is 10 minutes, 20 minutes is red, and black, you're out of the game. Serious consequence. I don't know. That's a consideration there. I'd never thought about that, going to 3 of them.
Yeah, I'm not against it. Just think about it. Is there a difference between a marginal offsides and a repeated infringement which denies a team an opportunity to score? So that's not a probable try, but a nice opportunity. There is, of course, there is. It's a different outcome for the team in possession. And if you're not attending to those, then the game becomes defensive. And so defense starts to dominate, which was the case for all World Cups leading up to 2015, where most of the playoff games became defensive, because that was what would end up winning you games. And I think in the last few years, I think World Rugby's tried to attend to that and try to give the attack a bit more confidence to do what they need to win games. So we've seen some good playoff games in the last couple of years.
Well, let's see. Hank Klopper asked a question. What are the stadiums which were the best and the worst for you to referee in? Would you have a favorite place that really made a great atmosphere or was easy to call a game, and other places were a challenge?
So I like the stadiums that were rugby stadiums, that were rugby centric. So the Millennium Stadium for me was probably the best. 80,000 people, closed roof. Welsh people love singing. So you could really hear, you could really hear everything in the stadium, and so the noise was fantastic. And I had some great experiences in my time in reffing in Wales. I remember the one game I wasn't even reffing. Chris White was reffing. I was at AR, and New Zealand were playing Wales, and the anthems were sung by. I remember the New Zealand girl was called Hayley Westenra, and the Welsh, I've just forgotten her name, but she's world famous, Catherine Jenkins, I think. And I just remember just standing there, the anthem's finished, and I carried on standing there thinking, this is theatre. This is not even just rugby. This is theatre. It just set the game up beautifully. So that Millennium was my favorite. I loved going to Twickenham. Lots of great experiences there as well. I remember one of my first ones. I had a friend in the stands, and I'd seen him before the game, and he was very proud of me because we went to school together. And this was like my first thing. I was running touch for England versus Argentina, and it was one of the first games after the Falklands War, or the Malvinas, or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And England was supposed to win handsomely, but they didn't. They ended up sneaking in by a couple of points, and Argentina played well above their World Rugby standing. And England scored a try coast to coast. I went a couple of times. I went up the length of the field, but I'd spotted Martin Johnson hitting one of their players. So I had my flag out. The crowd were going berserk. It was their moment. And there was me with my flag out, calling play back. I think Tupper reffed the game, so he had to come back. And I said, and he looked at me like, please, no, this is, the game's been so difficult to ref, and now we get this moment and you stick your flag out. But that, and my friend was in the stands, and he said to me, I actually couldn't believe that you did that to me. I was, I was loving that moment. So he said, but only you. And then that was a moment I was probably proud of in a way, because, that needed to be done despite whatever. So that, those two in the Northern Hemisphere. In South Africa, I loved stadiums like Newlands and Kings Park. I don't know what they're called these days anymore, but
Newlands is being dismantled, so we won't be calling anything.
Yeah, but same thing. Half the size of Millennium, but right on the field. The crowd were on the field, so it didn't feel like there wasn't atmosphere, or there wasn't thing. And I really enjoyed. But stadiums are stadium. It's bricks and mortar. It's mostly the experiences that are created on the grass.
No, that's a fair point. I went to 17 matches at the 2015 World Cup in England, and I didn't get to Twickenham. I've never been to Twickenham. Now, the Eagles are playing England on the 4th of July at Twickenham, but I think I have to have a body cavity search, a DNA sample, and a negative COVID test within 2 minutes before flying to England. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to make it, but that's going to be a bit tough. That's interesting. You know, Millennium, I was at the World Cup in 2015. I got to the Olympics in 2012 and was at Millennium to watch Team GB play South Korea in soccer. And I was literally at the top row at the end of the pitch. I didn't even know the rows went that high. I mean, aircraft fly lower than that. And but you're right about that. The feeling in there is amazing. When I was watching the All Blacks play in the World Cup, I was like 3 rows up right from the pitch, and it's like you're in the game. It's just amazing. You're right. The crowd is just right there. It's just unbelievable. Now, I wanted to ask you a question before we get close to wrapping up here, and that is there a sense of community, or is there? I mean, you've alluded to you stay in touch with this person, that person, but amongst top rugby officials, is there kind of some camaraderie or community there where you guys stay in touch and you share things? You've mentioned a few of these other officials out there.
Yeah, I think it's up to each individual. You know, some people slip off into obscurity. They don't really want to carry on with their involvement in the game. That's okay. All people are different. I've tried to remain involved. I think, you know, I didn't want to get onto committees really because I think it takes up a lot of time, and my experience was that they end up talking in circles, and there's agendas and there's horse trading, and it's not. I don't really like the politics of that at all. I thought my greatest product was probably what I did on the field, so I carried on reffing. You know, I retired as a pro ref in 2013, and then I carried on reffing predominantly schools rugby because South Africa's got a very strong schools culture, and where I lived in Cape Town, you know, we had probably on any given year maybe 6 to 8 of the top 20 schools in the country, and maybe 4 of the top 10. So, you know, I loved that. I loved being involved. And then, you know, I've moved, and it's sad because I reffed. I was just going through a couple of my jerseys, and I just saw that I reffed my 250th game, which was a pretty nondescript game between Hottentots Holland and Parel Fallet. And I got a jersey from the host team, you know, with all the little boys who signed the jersey, which was quite cute in a way, because it's replicating the heroes doing that, and then all these little fellas signing the jersey, which is great. But you know, I love that as much as the prestigious games as well.
No, that's awesome. So Hendo, who is from Kapstadt there in the Western Cape, he lives in the UK. He's been there for some time, and he's like, Twickenham, yes. when I get there, I'll probably say the same thing. I haven't been there yet. Now, Paulie asked a question. He says, without bias, why is it that South Africa's referees are so far ahead of the rest and always have many year after years? We have new ones coming out, Jaco Piper, Stuart Barry, Rasta Rastavinga. Of course, we could throw Craig Joubert in there, throw yourself in there. Is there anything to what Paulie's saying, that we seem to have a lot of top quality officials that come out and referees that come out of South Africa, or is that just are we biased or misrepresented?
No, and I don't think it's true. I think most countries go through cycles of producing good officials. I think South Africa, you know, the Currie Cup was a very good platform for us to show what we could do, because very competitive, and I loved the Currie Cup. We then got involved in Super Rugby. I did 100 plus games in Super Rugby, and that was a level up from Currie Cup. Probably the bridge to Test match rugby. If you remember correctly, the Australians actually had the best referees in the 90s. You know, they had 5 referees on the top panel, and then South Africa, I suppose we did well. We had Andre, myself, Tapa, Craig, maybe a couple of others. And I think Papes has taken the flag up well now. You know, he's the flag bearer. But I think we're actually quite thin at the moment. So you know, the point really around, do we have competent officials? Yeah, sure. We've got Stuart Barry. We've got Rasta, as you say. They've got AJ Jacobs, who's now got a gig in the Lions series, which I'm happy about. So, and there's I think Griffin Colby's coming through. The 2 Colby brothers are doing well, coming up through the ranks. So Divanos, there's a few names where I hope they kick on, but I wouldn't say we're in a strong position at the moment, Chris. I'd say we're in a rebuilding phase at best.
No, I think I would have to agree with you, Jonathan. That's my perception. That was Paulie's question. I just wanted to ask it for him. I kind of feel that way too. It does kind of like a sine wave. It seems to come and go, and I'm sure it has nothing to do with anything. It's just the nature of things and people's interest and who gets in it and what skills they bring to it when they come to it. So I'm sure that's all part of it. But you are now, I want to get to this. This is, as we wrap up here, you're now working with Major League Rugby. This is a United States effort, North America, I should say, not United States. We have a team in Toronto. But it's a North American effort to have professional rugby. We had an aborted thing called Pro Rugby. It went one season. I actually drove 6 hours to watch the last game, which was between Colorado and the Ohio Aviators. And it was an awesome game, a lot of tries scored, a lot of good game. But then the whole league folded after that because of dispute with USA Rugby, which has its own challenges. But now we have Major League Rugby. It's in its fourth season. Last year we only got 5 games because of the pandemic, and it went away. But this league has big names that have come over, and some people are like, oh, they're just past it. No, they're not past it. We got some big names that are very experienced, and they're not quite past it, still playing really good rugby. We got Ben Foden. We had Bostro came over last year. We had Tendam Tawira played a couple games last year for DC. Joe Peterson out there for San Diego. Now Cecil Africa's come out of sevens to play, and then Bjorn Basson, and the list goes on and on of a lot of big names that have come over here. Now also, the LA Guillotines with Matt Giddo and Adam Ashley Cooper. And so that's happening. But what I've noticed is that with this league, not only are we getting international talent to come over here and developing North American talent, which can only be good for the U.S. and Canadian national sides in the end, but we're also I've seen a lot of international officials that are calling the games. I assume that's by design. You're involved with this, with the selection of these folks and with the development of that. Is the intent to get a mix of international proven officials and referees and mix them with some of the up-and-coming talent from North America?
No, I mean, we've got so Chris Pollock and myself head up the management team. And we're adding to our management team as we go along. So we've added a bloke called Marquise Goodwin from the West Coast. He's a great guy, does a good job, helps me out with COVID testing, disciplinary matters, logistics. The same thing with the refs. The league identified before we came on board that the standard of officiating wasn't up to scratch. Mm-hmm. And so it was about us ascertaining whether these people that we inherited are not up to scratch or whether they can be coached into a space where they can deliver. So that was our first task this year. So we've given a lot of these players, a lot of these referees, 10 games plus to be able to give them a fair crack. We had to import a few referees. It was bloody difficult to get people over. And so we've been fortunate to get JP Doyle, Federico Anselmi, who both, I think, did in the region of 10 to 20 test matches. JP had a very long and distinguished career as a Premier Division referee in England, and Federico did a lot of Super Rugby. So, and then we got a guy called Mike Lash from New Zealand. So that was our international component. And nothing would give me greater satisfaction. Our plan is to get the the North American component, because Canada is part of MLR, to get them into a space where, I mean, obviously I'm not in control of that. That's not my domain. It's got nothing to do with what I intend to do with MLR. But the consequence of good coaching and great opportunities could coincide to make us a World Cup referee or two who we can put forward or who can help the USA put forward or Canada put forward as a credible person to, and as well as I do, it is highly likely that the World Cup will come to the USA, if not in 6 years, then in 10 years time, whenever it is. So it would be, I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that we could have a match official in the middle. And the MLR is a perfect platform to develop somebody if we can find that right quality of individual.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because I think it was just released yesterday. It was announced that, in fact, USA has been accepted as a bidder on the 2027 and 2029 for the Women 2031 Rugby World Cups. That's interesting. That has been the buzz and talk for the past, I'd say, at least 36 months, certainly the last 24 here in the U.S. Yeah. So we'll see if it happens. I am predicting this, 2035, Eagles take the World Cup. I'm ever the optimist.
I think the USA were the last team to win a gold medal at the maybe 1924 Olympics. So
we were the reigning world champions in the 15s until the Rio. Well, in rugby, until the Rio got.
Well,
the
it's not
sevens.
15, so it's not 15, so you can still be the reigning champions.
Yeah, technically, yeah, that's true. Although with the Webb Ellis Trophy, I guess it's a little bit different. But yeah. So one last question here from the audience, and then I'm gonna let you go, Jonathan. You've been very, very generous with your time. So 1010 says, Jonathan, what's your opinion on the new high tackle rule? Don't you think there's a risk that an attacking player can manipulate the rule in order to get advantage with the sanction?
I think the question is around the ball carrier changing his height and thereby nullifying the intent or what the defense wants to do. And I think that was actually the case. I wrote about it extensively. I used to write for the Times and the Telegraph and a few other publications. I wrote about it extensively, that it wasn't fair to the defender because the ball carrier could manipulate the height based on the contact point. And they've subsequently made the change. They've got Joe Schmidt on board, and so he helps with some of these challenges. And I think from 19 until now, there's been a noticeable change in the sanctioning of that, both in terms of the information that the referees have been given and subsequently in respect to the citing and disciplinary. So I do hear your point. There are still concerns around it. Sometimes it's a moot point. We've seen seatbelt tackles or we're being encouraged not to penalize seatbelt tackles that are not actually dangerous. So a player running back puts his hand over the shoulder of a ball carrier. In the past, that may have been straight away over the shoulders as a penalty. Now it's not a penalty. It's not penalty if it's not dangerous, right? So, that type of thing. But I think, like everything else in rugby, there's a little bit of bureaucracy, and sometimes things are a work in progress. They don't just happen immediately. But I do like Joel. I enjoy speaking to him. I enjoy working with him. It's his second stint as the head of refs, and I think he'll do a great job moving it forward. And like I said, Joe Schmidt is a very reasonable man, and I think he will also take that space into a very progressive realm.
No, I think it was a good question, and thank you for your answer on that. I saw what was called a high tackle and a yellow card was issued this weekend in Major League Rugby for what I thought was a bit unfair because, from my perspective, I wasn't on the field. I'm not making the call. I'm just a fan watching it. But it sure seemed pretty clear situation where the defender reached around the midsection to try to tackle the person, and you could see the player try to slide down, and then that's what caused what was a high tackle, and a yellow card came out. That's a bit tough, but yeah, that's. So let me ask you one final question.
Just to answer that quickly.
Sure.
Contrary to popular belief, the refs in MLR are also human, and you're 100% right. You're 100% right. They do make mistakes, but we don't want those mistakes to be their focus. We want the principle to be their focus, and the principle is we've got to try and protect the players. Player safety is right up on our agenda.
No, it's a great point. Thank you for that, Jonathan. So let me ask you a last question for myself, and that is, what's your favorite Rugby World Cup? Did you have a favorite World Cup experience? Was it Australia in 2003, or is it another one? Or one maybe you just attended, not even as a referee?
I was at the 95 World Cup and at Ellis Park, and I was there when the plane flew over, and I was there when Stransky, put the drop kick over. So that was a great memory for me. I was in the stands as a spectator. I hadn't really got onto the scene yet, but I absolutely loved it. And I was in the far corner and probably couldn't really see the ants running around, but I loved the experience. 99, I was there as a World Cup. 2000, I was there at the World Cup as an AR. Probably a bit disappointed that I wasn't there as a ref. 2003, I went to right, but just I suppose maybe I didn't hit the right buttons. And 2007 was sort of my redemption in a way. So I did a semi-final. South Africa played in the final. If there's one thing that I would have liked to have done, which I didn't achieve, was to do a final. But I don't think that really, and make no mistake, it would have been a cherry on the top. But I don't think that really defines someone's career because, like we've been speaking about, I think for the most part, if we look back and say I stayed true to my core principles. I tried always to put the game in front of my career, and the game first, the players first, the esoterics of what I was producing for the public, That makes me a lot happier than, a prestigious game or an achievement that I could have got along the way.
That's awesome. You mentioned Ellis Park. I was at the, I always want to say Tri-Nations, but it's the Rugby Championship now. The game where Habana pulled his hamstring after he scored 2 tries and the All Blacks won. They replicated that 95 situation a few years ago, 2013, I think it was. I was sitting in Ellis Park in the stands, and it was late afternoon. It was brutal. The sun was hitting really hard. And the plane was coming, and the people on the opposite side of the pitch could see it. And you hear this cheer go up. You're like, what's going on? The team, something going on, and all of a sudden the plane came out, and that's I don't know how low it was in 95, but it was pretty low when I was there. That the pilot who did that, they got in a lot of trouble again too, I guess. But that had to be quite an amazing experience, one that you'll cherish and never forget. So I didn't realize you were a spectator at that game. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. I watched 87, just moderately. 91, I was involved. I enjoyed the tournament. I remember things from that tournament. I think it was probably one of the best tournaments, actually. 91, 95, like I said, proud that it was in South Africa. 99, I got involved. 03, great tournament. I ended up actually being the TMO in the final because I don't really mind that domain. I feel quite comfortable doing that. So I think that's potentially why I got that role. I was very pleasantly surprised with France and the organization, and the way that they went about their business was really good. It was classy. It was attention to detail. It was good. 11 in New Zealand, I think I had a scooter accident 8 weeks before the tournament, and I split my articular. I think it's articular. No, what is it? My patella tendon. I split my patella tendon. Wow. And the normal recovery is 3 to 4 months, and I didn't have time. So I literally went on I used to wake up at night sweating that I wasn't going to go to my last World Cup, and I made it there. So, that was probably my biggest physical achievement, was to get myself over the line and go to that World Cup. And I was a bit disappointed not to do better than, not to achieve more than I did, but I was very happy to be involved.
Well, that was a brilliant World Cup. That was my first. I've gone all the World Cups since 2011. 11 in New Zealand, 14 Paris for the women, 15 England, 17 Belfast for the women, 18 San Francisco for the sevens, and then 19 in Japan. But 11 was my first one. I'd have to say to the Kiwis, that was from a viewer's perspective, that was so well organized. The volunteers were amazing. The venues were fantastic. It was just an amazing experience. I hope you had, you were recovering from this injury, but I hope you had an amazing experience in New Zealand too for that World Cup.
Yeah, I did. I actually loved going to New Zealand. I should actually be honoring New Zealand and Australian citizens, because I went to each country in excess of 100 times over the period from 99 to 2011. And I always feel like I almost was like a pilot in many ways. I knew exactly where to go. I knew which gates were where. It was ridiculous. Anyway.
Well, let me get a few comments in here, and when we will wrap up, there's some very nice things being said here. Teresa says, thank you, Jonathan. All the best with your ventures. And then Cameron says, Jonathan Kaplan is the best ref in the world has seen. Paulie says, Nigel Owens was a close second. And then just some really nice comments here. Nick Muller says, awesome ethics, Jonathan, by a donkey for Alice. Yeah, so Jonathan Kaplan, it's been a real pleasure. I don't want to end it, but I know you've got other responsibilities, so I'm going to let you get back to those. And thank you for your time, and appreciate coming here on Chris Wide Africa. Thanks a lot. Any parting thoughts or things you'd like to share with us, maybe about Major League Rugby or about the state of rugby going forward?
No, I'm excited about MLR. They've had a number of challenges the last couple of years, COVID related in particular, but any fledgling league is difficult to get off the ground, because and in an environment like North America, where there are entrenched sports and all the networks are focused on those entrenched sports, and most of the advertising happens around those sports, it's quite difficult. Even for the Rugby World Cup, I think, is the third biggest event outside of the Soccer World Cup and the Olympics. So it's not like a Mickey Mouse thing. The sport it's a big sport globally, but to try and get it so I think that's going to be the challenge. I'm so chuffed that I said chuffed again, that they got the show on the road this year, because there was a time where they weren't sure and they had to shift everything out, and eventually took the plunge, and we're finished with round 12. And so they've made a really, the league office and people behind the scenes getting this whole act together. I don't think I could probably write a book on the challenges that have been faced pre-season and in motion. I'll just share one of them with you. At one stage, they just told me that they wouldn't have ball boys. And initially when I thought about it, I thought, we're not going to have ball boys at the end of the world. But the more you think about it, you absolutely need ball boys. Ball boys is the continuity. If you can't find a ball, you kick the ball out for a line out, and you're chasing a game with a couple of minutes to go. You can't find a ball, and there's no ball to be had. And who's chasing around getting the balls? But because of these safety concerns, they didn't have, they couldn't have ball boys. So they found a way around it, and that's what we've been doing the whole year. We've been finding ways around the challenges. So I'm excited. I do agree with you. I think the MLR is here to stay. I think it'll expand, and I think rugby in North America will expand. And I'm always careful to say that, because I'm based in Toronto now, and the Canadians have been very good to me. So, I hope it is what I think it can be.
Well, it's been unbelievably flexible. I mean, the league has done amazing things here. I mean, they went forward knowing that they couldn't have fans in the stands at many venues starting the season. They took the unprecedented step of the Arrows from Toronto coming down to Atlanta and sharing the facilities with Rugby ATL, and both teams playing out of there. That's got to be took off for all those players. I mean, in the Army, I'm accustomed being away from family for weeks, months, years on end because of deployments. But for athletes being gone for such a long stretch, not being able to get home and playing on the road, your home game is Atlanta when you live in Toronto. But they've been very flexible. But I did see what you talk about, the impact of not having ball boys. I was at Rugby Atlanta last week. Was it last week or maybe 2 weeks ago? It was last week. And I was down there for Memorial Day, and there was a warm-up game between Fort Benning and the Marines, and there was no ball boys. And so they kept stopping the clock. And I'm like, I'm not accustomed to watching the clock stop unless the officials called, if somebody's injured or something like that. And I'm like, why is the clock stop? And I realized that someone's running around in the woods next to the field trying to find the ball because there's no ball boys on the pitch. What a disastrous impact that has on the game. And I think people don't realize and don't appreciate it. That's a good point you brought out there. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, pleasure. We'll probably carry on, but maybe a good time to knock it on the head. And yep. I'd be happy to come on again another time for another hour. You can get a couple of other ideas and thoughts, and there's literally hours and hours of material to share with people. But like I said to you in the beginning, I do have this Instagram account, J Kaplan Ref, where I tell stories about looking back on the career, and I think it is interesting.
Well, Jonathan, to that end, I was going to mention, I'm glad you brought it back up again, is that I actually went and checked out your Instagram account when you mentioned it to me. It's a brilliant Instagram account, folks. It shows, Jonathan going through life and different things happening, rugby related, personal related. It's really a nice, sort of like a mini biography, if you want to look at that, to learn more about him and appreciate the game. I saw that Paulie subscribed as soon as you mentioned it earlier. A couple other people went and subscribed, so feel free to go. What's the account again, so they can find it easily?
J Kaplan Ref, just very basic. Yeah.
There you go. All right. Well, with that, let's get you back on again in the future. Maybe as we get close to the end of the season or the playoffs, we could talk about that.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan Kaplan. I appreciate your time today. God bless.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Nice to be on your show.
Pleasure. All right. I'll let Jonathan sign off there, and then I'll wrap up the program, folks. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was none other than rugby referee, official legend Jonathan Kaplan from South Africa. South Africa, mixing German Afrikaans and English there. Sorry about that. But that was an awesome conversation. I really enjoyed it. And that's what you get here on Chris White Africa. You get a conversation. It is an interview, but it's less an interview and more a sharing and a conversation with people that are of interest to you from around the world. Bill Heslop has just subscribed. Thank you for the subscription there, Bill. Really appreciate that. And Hank has just put in, if you're looking for it, that's the username on Instagram. If you want to go check out, sign up for Jonathan's Instagram account. Thank you so much, folks. I'm scheduled to have Gary Gold, USA Eagles head coach, on here at 2 p.m., which is in 45 minutes. But I may have made a communication error, so I can't promise it will happen. I've set up the stream. If Gary isn't there, then I'll do a short stream and we'll just discuss a few of the news items of the day. But in the meantime, thank you so much to my guest, to Jonathan Kaplan. It was a pleasure. Thank you to Hank, who suggested him and helped me get in contact with him. He was a brilliant guest, and hearing all these experiences was fascinating. Also brings back lots of wonderful rugby memories for all of us, I'm sure. Thanks a lot, folks. God bless. Hey, Brian Johnson, welcome to you. God bless, and we'll catch you here probably in about 44 minutes on Chris White Africa. Hopefully I'll have Gary Gold on there. You guys take care, and it is Friday. It is Freitag, so have a lekker Freitag, all right? And we'll catch you later on. Appreciate your support and patronage for Chris White Africa and for Rugby Ascendant. Take care, folks.